L'chaim, everyone. I want to thank everyone for coming. I know it's a very busy time at this time of year for the women, for the cleaning, the beautiful weather that we're having outside. So it's really special that everyone took time out of their schedules to come and participate. It's very hard to believe that 30 years have passed from that eventful day when Ari HaKodesh was brutally taken away from us. I personally have my own memories that when I received the call, rushing down to St. Vincent's Hospital, I saw Ari there, and when you looked at him in the bed at that time, you really didn't see any trauma on his body. You would think he was sleeping at that time. He looked in a certain way fine. I don't know. And we were hoping that he would wake up, show us a smile, and go on. But that's not the way the Eibishter planned it. We've heard over the years so many stories, special stories about Ari's shenanigans, his special connection that he had with the Rebbe Shlita and the Rebbetzin. And time flies, but we do miss him. Barry called me about 2 weeks ago and asked me if I would make the siyum. At first, to be honest with you, I was very hesitant because usually siyum and me, it's not really my forte, let's put it that way. And I thought there would be other family members that would be more apropos to do it. But I actually feel very privileged that the Devar would consider me, and I told her it would be my honor. This was about 2 weeks ago. So I had to pick a Masechta to learn that I could finish in time for the siyum and within my schedule. And I picked Haidias, which I found out, even though it only has 14 blot, it's quite a very difficult Masechta. And I did my best and we finished it, and I want to give a special shout out to the Shotting family for the Gemara, because I definitely. The Masechta Sotah deals primarily with the kapara, with the atonements of erroneous rulings. It focuses on the different karbanos, Sanhedrin, the judges, the Kohen Gadol, and Klal Yisrael have to bring for an atonement, and that's where it gets its name, Haidias. Haidias comes from the word Haida'ah. So that's where it gets its title. It really should have been after Kachin, because it talks primarily about different karbanos. But since it involves erroneous judgment, it follows Avos. Because it says, in Avos, it starts off with Hevi Misunim Badin, where we're warning the judges to make sure whatever judgments they make should be correct. So that's why Hadias follows Avos. While learning the Masechta, I was looking for some sort of connection that I could tie in with tonight's Yartzeit. And these are my own personal thoughts. I didn't get it anywhere. In the Gemara on Daf Yud Gimel Amud Aleph, the Mishnah discusses priority of redemption when different people, God forbid, get captured. And it says the halakha there that if a man and woman are captured, chas v'sholom, the woman must be redeemed first. And there are several reasons given there, but I would like to offer my own. On that horrendous day, in a sense, but the very adventure channeled her sorrow and her positivity, brought awareness into this community, city, and even the entire country. Federal laws were enacted thanks to her perseverance, and her life mission continues to be that Ari HaKodesh is never forgotten. This amazing building that we are in is a testament to all her endeavors. I would like to give her our bracha, that Hashem should continue to give her strength and gesund and continue in her holy work, and together with Reuven and the entire family, be safe to see Ari here back in this world. Okay. The end of the Masechta tells a very interesting story. It talks about Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, who was the Nasi of that generation, Reb Meir, who was considered the Chacham, the sage, and Reb Nosson, who was the Av Bezdin. At first, when they all entered the Beis Medrash, everyone would stand up together for them. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, and it says that he didn't do it for his own kavod, but he did it for the kavod of the Nesias. That's what the Maharsha says. He said, L'shem Shemayim, that's not correct. Because it says that Efshar, Shishamshu b'kesed echad l'shnei malachim. You can't have two people in charge. One person has to be in charge, and that was the Nasi. So that one day, Reb Shimon ben Gamliel set up new rules and procedures. How it's going to work when the Talmidei Chachamim come into the Beis Medrash. When the Nasi entered, everyone had to stand up and stay standing until he told them to sit. When the Av Bezdin entered, the Talmidei Chachamim were standing in his row, they stood up. They didn't have to, and when he sat down, they could all sit down. They didn't have to wait for him to give them permission. And when the Chacham came in, only the Talmidei Chachamim, which were in his own Daled Amos, only those had to stand, everyone else could remain seated. Reb Meir and Reb Nosson, who were then, Reb Meir was the Chacham, and Reb Nosson was the Av Bezdin, they weren't in the Beis Medrash on that day. They didn't know about it. And when they entered, no one got up or whatever. They didn't get the same respect that they were expecting, and they didn't know what happened. And they asked what changed. And they told them that the Nasi, Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, had changed the rules. And they felt slighted. And again, everyone, all the Mefarshim speak about it wasn't a personal slight. They felt for kavod ateidah. It wasn't right. And they decided that they were going to teach Reb Shimon ben Gamliel a lesson. And they would even have him overthrown. They decided that the next day they were going to ask him to explain the Masechta of Uktzin, which is a very, very difficult Masechta, not really learned a lot. And if he couldn't explain it properly, then he couldn't be Nasi anymore. There was a Reb Yaakov ben Kashi who overheard the plan, and he felt it was very improper to try to embarrass the Nasi, Reb Shimon ben Gamliel. So he went up to the balcony where Reb Shimon ben Gamliel was learning and started to learn Uktzin very loud. Once, twice, 3 times. He just kept on repeating the whole Masechta. When Reb Shimon ben Gamliel heard this, he realized something was up. And he said something to do with Uktzin. So he prepared. And he studied it until he knew the whole Masechta perfectly. And the next day in the Beis Medrash, Reb Nosson and Reb Meir asked the Nasi Reb Shimon ben Gamliel to explain them the Masechta Uktzin, and he did it perfectly. And they had nothing, he answered all their questions. And then he told Reb Meir and Reb Nosson, you try to embarrass me, you can no longer come into the Beis Medrash. Now, Reb Meir and Reb Nosson, in a way, were the leaders there. They taught the Talmidim and the Chachamim what to learn. So they sat outside the Beis Medrash. And it says in the Gemara, what they would do is they would write questions or subject matter on tablets. You see, even back then they had tablets. They would write it on tablets and they would throw it in through the window. And that's what the Chachamim would learn that day. And anything that they couldn't answer, they would ask them, they would write the answer out again on tablets and send it in. Eventually, Reb Yossi, who was there, said it's not right. We're sitting inside and the Torah is sitting outside. It's not correct. So they went to Reb Shimon ben Gamliel and said, if you don't let them back in, we're going to go outside. So he said, fine. But, and that's why we learned Gemara today, he said, no new Torah that they come up with will be credited to their name. And he changed it. That Reb Meir, who was the Chacham, became a Chedim. If we learn Gemara, sometimes you'll see a Chedim Amdu. And actually, the Meiri explains a Chedim was in a way, it wasn't derogatory, because a Chedim actually has, if you spell out the words, a Chedim actually has the name Meir in it with an extra ches, which shows that Hitaka was a Chacham. And Reb Nosson, he changed his name to Yesh Emrim. When you learn Gemara, you'll see Yesh Emrim. And the Rishonim ask, why was it plural? It should have been Achad and Yesh Emrim. Why is it plural? Because there's an inyan to repeat words whoever said it. And they were afraid that if it would be in the singular form, the student, Talmidim, that yeshiva would try to find out who actually said it. So they did it in a plural form, so this way you could say whoever said it, over time it got lost. And the Gemara goes on, and it tells a story later on of Rebbe, who was actually the son of Reb Shimon ben Gamliel. He was learning with the son of Reb Shimon, halacha regarding an animal that was mistakenly, holding it of Tmuda, was mistakenly assigned the Meiser designation. And he said, V'yesh Emrim, which was really the mayor, that din is that behemoth cannot be brought as a carbon. And he brought it as V'yesh Emrim. So Reb Shimon said, who was this Yesh Emrim? And he was able to convince his father to allow the name of the mayor. So not exactly totally, but he would say in the name of the mayor. Now we're going to say the last words of the Masechtas Hagios. So it says, Abaya v'Rabba v'Rab Rabbi Bar Masna Havi Yasvei v'Havitz Nichadesha. Abaya and Rabba and Rab Zeda and Rab Nasne, they were sitting and they needed a teacher to lead them in learning. Amri, they said, Kol da Amri Milza, whoever says a Dvar Teda or a Lacha and we do not slug it up, we do not ask on it, he will be Lehavidesha, he will be the leader. The Kulay Yifta, but all of them were refuted. Abaya lo Yifta, and Abaya, his words were not refuted. Chazeh, Rabba, Abaya the Gaberesha, Rabba saw that he picked up his head, and he said, Nachmeni psach ve'ema. Nachmeni, get up and give a shear. Then the Gemara asked, we just talked about it before, Ibaya lahu. The Abzeda and Rabbi Bar Masna, the Abzeda and Rabbi Masna were discussing Imanaya Adif, which one is better? The Abzeda Chadif, Umacha, one like the Abzeda who's sharp and understands and can ask all sorts of questions. But Rabbi Bar Masna, which is Masun Umesi, that he can reach conclusions. Which one is the better one? Which is the best approach? And the Gemara ends off in Teiku. And just before I say the Hadron, that's Hadron, Hadron Kaina Mashiach, Sligalai Masechtas Hagios. And it's a very strange thing that the Gemara should end off with such a lashon Teiku. Because it's like, first of all, we already have, if you learned the Gemara, you already had the subject before, we discussed it before, but it says Teiku. And what does the Teiku stand for? It stands for Tishbi V'Yataretz Kushis V'Abayis. That Tishbi, Eliyahu Navi Mitzvah Shem, will come and answer all the questions. So that is our tefillah for tonight, that Eliyahu Navi should finally come, answer all the questions, bring back Ari HaKodesh, the Rebbe, and bring the ultimate Gula of Mashiach. Amen. Hadden Allah Meseftes Hagios, Hadden Allah, Hadden Allah, Daiten Allah Meseftes Hagios, Daiten Allah. Leist Misnation Menach, Meseftes Hagios, V'lei Misnation Menach, V'lei Ba'amad Ein, V'lei Ba'amad Dasi. Hirat Menach Adenei V'seinu, Shetehei Tzedasa, and V'neseinu B'yom Hazeh, V'seinu Manu Le'yom Abba, Chanina Bar Papa, Dami Bar Papa, Nachman Bar Papa, Chai Bar Papa, Abamedi Bar Papa, Dafra Bar Papa, Dakish Bar Papa, Seifer Bar Papa, Ada Bar Papa, Gode Bar Papa. Hadem no Adenei Leheinu, Stivit Tzedasa, Befinu, V'fies Amcha Besis Stol, V'yin after v'tzetzenu, v'tzetze after go basis stol, kononi yedishmecha, v'lein yedishmecha, v'shma no'evet tichatmein v'tzecha v'tzecha he livi tomi v'kef l'mam le'evesh le'lam le'eshka v'kedecha Yivam ki yisonu barak ato adonai lamteini chukecha amen amen selavoed Meidem anapolach adonai l'vesenu Shesamta chalkeinu b'yeshu beis ha-medrash Loi samta chalkeinu b'yeshu ha-kadarnos Shonu mashkimin v'hem mashkimin On mashkimin l'divrei seda v'hem mashkimin l'divrei L'dvarim b'teilim Anu amelim v'hem amonim Hem amelim v'mekabim star v'hem Anu amelim v'mekabim star v'hem amelim v'en mekabim star Anu ratzim v'hem ratzim Anu ratzim l'chayim l'bav V'hem ratzim l'ver shachas Shnemar V'ata l'him terik dem l'ver shachas Anshi dami mimar v'leyasu Agimein v'niyaf takbach Yiratzim v'panecha Adonim v'esenu Shem sh'zetani l'chsayim V'saptas Hedius Ken Tatzrein l'haskam V'saptas V'sfarim achenim V'saimam Vilmoy l'lamed Lishman l'lasis L'kayim shkolti v'salma teresechet l'hava V'schos kolet Tremaim v'merayim V'samniti chachamim Yamed liya l'zadi Shleit somish Teira mipi Zerizadi ad elam Tiskayim bi Salepta tancha Esach Shafwa tishmar v'lecha V'apitzaisa hi sichecha Kivi yibri yam echa v'yasifa L'chal shneis chayim edef yami b'yimina B'smein leish v'chabay Adonai oiz l'amita Ne'ivara v'sami v'sholay Skadal v'skadal shmeirava All the Buddhas together with us, we ask for God to become the sheep. I told you that I love you, love, like all of his man, God, we go, Die hele Menschen von der Bettina begrüßt, was man gar nicht wissen soll, dass wir bekommen von den Schweinen gekommen. Ich habe da Schwein mit dem und den unter Israel gekommen. Ich schon mit dem Rias schon mit dem unter Israel gekommen.
Thank you so much for those moving words and that beautiful, remarkable siyum. Well, Ari was a Kaddish and he died al Kiddush Hashem. I'm certain he doesn't need an Aliyas in the Neshama, but nonetheless, I will say that your siyum this evening certainly brought, I'm sure, merited his Neshama great schus. And I am certain that he will continue looking down upon you and your family, and may you and your family just have much continued bracha and atzlacha, refuah and mazel in all areas to you and to everyone here. At my mother's request, I'd like everyone to please eat. While she's not standing up here this evening, I am taking a role as the Jewish mother here, so I'm just going to remind everyone, please eat, if you haven't yet already. It is apropos that in today's Torah portion, we read about the episode of Aaron's two sons, Hadassim and Avihu. And in that episode, you see that their lives are taken. And Moshe, as he's speaking to Aaron, he says that it was relayed to me by Hashem, by Kadosh Baruch Hu. He says, that through the ones that are closest to me, I will be honored. Ari was certainly somebody who in retrospect, we can say that through him, we are all honored. It says the Torah B'nai Yisrael is going to be honored through the sacrifice of Dasan and Aviv. We know that Ari literally and figuratively took the bullet for the Rebbe, and tonight is all about learning from Ari and what his life meant to and means to all of us, both in past and present. So it would be most appropriate to do that and to introduce someone, a childhood friend from Ari's youth, who has agreed to join us this evening and to share a few recollections and words of inspiration and chizuk that he took both from his friendship with Ari growing up and how that has impacted him and has led him into the present and moving on to the future. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Rabbi Shmuley Metzger, Shliach to Sutton Place, New York.
Good evening. This is Halberstam Mishpacha, friends. When Shia called me and he said, speak about Ari, he asked me if I would speak about Ari, and I knew who he wanted me to speak about it, and I knew who he did not want me to speak about. So there's two Aris. There is the Ari, there's Aron Yosef, HaKadosh Aron Yosef, who reached the highest distinction in our faith, who is the highest level of HaKadosh in the same class as the Asara Haruvim Malchus, as the 10 great rabbis who gave their life simply for being Jews, Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Shmuel ben Elisha Kohen Gadol, and there's Ari Halberstam. He's in that class, the highest level and the highest class in our faith. But then there's Ari, our friend, and that's he wants. So we're going to speak about Ari. This takes us back to 1985, a long time before there was internet. Anyone remember such a time? And I went to camp, and there were two yeshivas in Crown Heights. There were two yeshivas, Lubavitch Yeshiva and Alei Torah, and we did a mix. It was like the Crips and the Bloods. We were like a lot of tension. They felt we weren't holy enough. We felt they didn't speak English. The syntax was a little off. We would make fun of them. They would make fun of us. Anyway, so it came time to camp, and I just prayed that I would be with the Lubavitch Yeshiva kids. But sure enough, they call up, it was Bunk Gimel, and they call up, and they say, there's Ari Halberstam, and I was, I'm going to be with an Alei Torah kid. I knew exactly the kids in the yeshiva, and they called me up, and we're looking at each other suspiciously, and I was like, what's going to happen? But then, Ari, it came time, not long thereafter, we unpacked our stuff, and we got baseball, and Ari stepped into the batter's box. Okay, so a little bit about Ari is that when he would play ball, he didn't just stand there like, standing there with the bat, but if anyone's ever seen someone with a lulav, Mizrach Ma'ariv Darim Tzav, and he would hold the bat this way, that way, he was completely into it. And I looked at him and said, I like this kid. We became very close. Eventually, when I was able to get myself into the Lubavitch Yeshiva bunk, he came along with me. And he came to Lubavitch Yeshiva. We actually got into our side, to Lubavitch Yeshiva, where he was for a few years. Before she had mentioned that the events of this week's Torah portion, that there's this big excitement, that there's the initiation of the Mishkan, the biggest event in history, that godliness comes into the world, and all of a sudden there's this major tragedy where Aaron's two sons, their souls go up, and there's a lot of confusion, because there's a lot of happiness, and there's a lot of sadness, and what are we supposed to do? Rashi breaks down a Talmud from Tractate Subis, where it says, interesting Talmudic traffic law. It says if there's like a little one lane, and if you've ever been to like Europe and there's like one little lane and who yields to who, and there's one lane and there's a mourning procession going by, people in deep mourning, and then there's a wedding procession coming from the other direction. Who has to yield to who? does the sadness yield to the happiness or the happiness to the sadness? You would think that the revelers would have to yield to the mourners. Says the Gemara, no. That the sadness has to yield for the happiness. And so, tonight, we talk about sadness, but I would like to focus on the happiness and the amazing times, and certainly through the prism of how we can incorporate Ari into our own life. So, it's interesting. When I think of Ari, it's interesting that one word to describe would be very, very. It's interesting. Someone asked, there was a great rabbi, Adin Steinsaltz Evan Yisrael, and he was at a conference where they were trying to foster tolerance between people of different faiths and create understanding. And someone asked him, Rabbi, what is a Jew? And he answered something very unexpected. People thought he would say something about a soul, something about a divine mission. He said, a Jew is very. You can be very smart. And we have Jews who, unfortunately, are incredibly foolish. We have Jews who are incredibly honest, and sometimes we have the exact opposite. A Jew, whatever he is amplified very much. Ari was, everything he did was amplified. It was full gear. So when he played, and when we were a younger age, in camp that year, by the way, he was like, everything sports was very. By the way, he would get packages from the Rebbetzin. Packages from the Rebbetzin started coming to camp, and everything he did. This is who he was. He played. He was the hopping tag king. Back in the day, we would play outside the Rebbetzin Farbrengen. There was hopping tag, and then later on there was in front of 770 a game called Kugelach. He was always right in the middle and very, very incredibly engaged. And I think that's a lesson that we can incorporate into our own lives, not to do things halfway. It says, B'chol levavcha, it says in the Shema, love Hashem with all your heart. B'chol nafshecha, with all your soul. And then it says, B'chol meidecha, with your very essence. And that was and is Ari to us. Something else about Ari that I'd like to share, and again, that we can incorporate into our own life, is that one of the mitzvahs in the Rambam is v'halachta b'dracha, be like God. So the commentaries say, well, like, how's that supposed to work? We're physical and God is infinite, and how's that supposed to work? So the simple interpretation is brought down in Maimonides and the Rambam is do what Hashem does. God is kind, you be kind. We see in the beginning of the Torah that Abraham, after his circumcision, is hurting, and then God comes to visit him. Visit the sick, be kind. We find in the story of Aaron HaKohen, he's mourning his sons, God visits. Help those and help encourage those and those who are in bereavement. So be kind. But perhaps there's a different interpretation as well, and that is you can't define God. God by definition can't be defined. So don't be one-dimensional. Transcend definition. Ari was he wasn't the kid who studied Torah. He was the kid who played sports, he learned Torah, he did everything. Whatever he did. And it's interesting that because we were friendly and very friendly, and I wasn't his only friend, many friends, dear friends, he didn't have acquaintances, he had deep, real, meaningful relationships, people who he loved and people that were beloved to him. And throughout, you see him as a young boy in sports, and then a rite of passage is in Chabad. It's putting on tefillin, but also the first obvious thing you see is a boy. He puts on a hat. He's almost 13. Ari put on a hat. He was a different boy. He became what we would call a Hasidic bacher. He became really into it. So he would go to Hasidus. He was always on time. On Fridays, even though he was so incredibly, he was really into sports. And he was a big Met fan. He would go on Mitzayim on Friday afternoon, even though it's a very long schedule in yeshiva, it's a 15-hour day. And in many yeshivas, on Friday afternoon, when they give you up for the Shabbos, kids play basketball. There were even some kids here where they go down to Lefferts Park. Ari, even though he was really into sports, he took his role as a chassid very seriously. In the Rebbe's school of Judaism, a chassid is you're on the production side of Judaism. You're not a taker, you're a giver, you're on the production side. Ari took that very seriously. And every Friday, he would go to Wall Street area and he would speak to people many times his age and encourage them, put tefillin on them and encourage them to in their Yiddishkeit. And so in conclusion, I would like to wish everyone here that we be reunited with Ari very soon, and that no one envisioned 30 years of extra innings, Gullus. The Rebbe said that Mashiach is just here. So, but every second, we're 1 second closer to the coming of the Mashiach. We're not 30 years away, we're 30 years closer, and hopefully we will be reunited tonight with Ari, with the coming of Mashiach, and only have happy times up ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Shmuley. You never cease to amaze and surprise me. So thank you for your sharing your memories of Ari and your thoughts and how it can impact our day-to-day lives. In life, we have blood relatives, and then we have our chosen family, those who we choose to surround ourselves with. So we just want to acknowledge, of course, the family members that are here this evening, but in addition to that, our chosen family, those friends who have come from near and far to be here and to celebrate Ari's life and to commemorate his 30th Yartzeit. In every good Jewish family, of course, you have a lawyer and you have a dentist. And for us, a dear family friend, part of that chosen family is the family dentist. So we'd like to ask Dr. Rubin to please come up and share a few words of inspiration and wisdom. And dental surgeon, oral surgeon, so that we want to get all the titles and appellations out there. If I missed anything, doctor, please don't hold it against me. But we'd like to please ask you to come up and share a few words. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Deborah, for the 2.5-minute warning that I'm going to be up here speaking. But as everyone knows, you don't say no to Deborah. And it's my honor to be asked to come up and speak. And I'm really not the family dentist, periodontist, educator, surgeon.
You'd be surprised how many patients you have. That's right.
There's a thing called HIPAA. I don't consider myself a friend. I consider myself part of the family. And there's a term in English, and it's called legacy. And what it means is the impact what one has on their life from their past deeds, their past experiences, and what does it mean to affect the future. On my way here, anecdotally, I was calling my colleague, and tomorrow morning we have a 6:30 conference call. So he asked me a couple questions about this call. What are we going to be discussing? We have to be prepared. So I said, listen, I can't really talk now. I just finished work, and I'm on my way to Crown Heights to a Yartzeit for Ari Halberstam. And this person is in Stamford, Connecticut, and not from, recently had his bar mitzvah, and he's in his 50s, from Chabad in our area, because we decided that it would be best that he treat this person because he didn't have a personal connection to this Chabad person. And through that person, he was able to have a bar mitzvah in his 50s. And I said to him, you know, I don't know if you know who Ari Halberstam is, but I'm going to his 30th Yartzeit. And he said to me, of course I know who Ari Halberstam is, because I remember where I was when that unfaithful day happened. And if you think about it, this is someone who has no connection, or almost no connection previously to Yiddishkeit. But he knew the day, and he knew where he was when that happened so long ago. And so we don't know the impact we have in our lives on the future. We know what we think our path might be. But as everyone knows, that path is unknown for all of us. And so we think about, from my standpoint, where we were at certain events in life. My brother clearly reminds me of the day when JFK was shot. My children remember, 9/11, because even though they were small at the time, they remember the impact that day they had. My children, my grandchildren, and obviously everyone in Clarksville in the world know and will have this remember what October 7th is and what it meant afterwards. But for here today, we all have a memory of that day when Ari Halberstam was nifted. And I don't speak to Devorah, on a one-to-one basis, but the question is, what do we do when that event occurs? How do we respond to these events? How do our children respond to October 7th? How do our children respond to 9/11? How does my brother's impact of JFK being shot affected his life? When we look at what Ari's life and what his impact had upon all of us, and especially the Halberstam family, we just have to look around the room. We see how this has changed the relationship of Yiddishkeit to the rest of the world. It was clearly, in my mind, the beginning of understanding what terrorism was to a specific form of Judaism. And it's something that clearly was not in the public eye until this event occurred. And what did Devorah do with that day? She scraped off her knees, she got up, and she created this institution and the function of which has served to protect us for many years. I remember sitting at the groundbreaking ceremony next to this humble guy, I think his name was Michael Bloomberg, and everyone around him was asking, well, what do you think about this building? What do you think it's going to be? And he said it's going to be something big. And that has profoundly affected my thought process in the years that have come since then. Is that's okay with me. How does that impact upon us? And how does that legacy of what Ari's mace affect us? And how Devorah's life has changed since that day? Now we also know from Yiddishkeit that some of the things we do and some of our impacts are in Olam Hazeh and some of our impacts are in Olam Haba. Which one they are for all of us, none of us know. The question is, what do we do on the day after? And so for that, I give a lot of accolades to Devorah and the entire Halberstam family for taking Ari's death and turning it into changing the way our relationship is with the world and our relationship with other peoples and other Jews. Because someone from Stamford, Connecticut, who never had a connection for Judaism and Yiddishkeit, knew exactly what that impact was upon him. And to that's pretty profound in understanding where we are today and where we have to go in the future. So I just want to end with the note that we all are impacted here today. Some of those events we know about, and clearly some events we don't know about. The question is, what do we do tomorrow? And with that, I'd like to end and say thank you for giving me the opportunity to share a few thoughts with you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rubin. We're now going to take a few-minute break for people to get up, stretch their legs, please eat. Thank you for the women remind me to eat. Please eat. And we will continue the program in just a short bit. Thank you.
My mother's
We're going to carry on with the program. I'll have your attention, please. As we mentioned earlier, we're here to commemorate the 30th Yartzeit of our brother Ari. As I alluded to before, how appropriate it is that we speak about the episode of Nadav and Avihu in this week's parsha, as the pasuk concludes after we talk about the Kravai Kodesh. The pasuk ends off by saying, "Vayidom Aaron," and Aaron was silent. And Rashi explains, as well as all the other commentaries, that Aaron's silence was to his chus, to his merit. So our next speaker is somebody who, while they have many merits and they're quite meritorious through their many actions and positive deeds, someone who is not quiet. They haven't been quiet. Somebody who has leaned into their strength and found power in their voice to commemorate Ari and what he stood for and what he died for as a Jew, as a proud Jew. So I'd like to ask my mother to please come up and to share with us a few words. Thank you.
I don't know if the lesson for me is, I never thought of it as V'chayitena libo means Vayidom Aaron, so, but I always, everybody knows, can't fight with God, but I definitely put up a little fight up there all the time. So therefore, I make the noise on behalf of the Jewish people. The first thing I want to say tonight is thank you all for coming. And I also have to ask Mechila for Mari tonight, because I couldn't find the pictures, which I wanted to put up tonight, was Ari putting on tefillin the first time by the Rebbe's minion. And I just couldn't find the boxes with it. And you saw Ari's face. It was a face of a kadosh and a betonim like you never saw it. He was in awe, and his face was white like a sheet because of what that moment meant. And I just couldn't find it. You know, tomorrow morning I'll find it. So I want to bet Mechila. So my speech is not prepared tonight, but I want to say, because it says about the Eibishter that we call the Eibishter many names, Hamakom. When we say Hamakom, it's because Hashem could be in all places at all times, no matter what. So he's here, and he's in Israel, and he's in South Africa, and he's in Australia, and he's all over the world. But for that reason, there's no number when it comes to the Eibishter. Because my son is, of course, as we said before, for a Kaddish, there's no, we don't count, and the Aliyas and the Shama is for a Kaddish is in the highest, whatever that means, the highest place that there possibly could be. But in Kedusha, there's no end to elevation, so clearly he is. But one thing I will say, nobody here talked about it, and I will not go there, that it's the 30th year, what that means, because Rabbi Metzger said it before, about time. We're not counting time, we're only moving forward, and I don't want to go back and count the years that Ari's not been here. It's painful, and there's no reason for it. But because we talked about V'chayit and Aliva, there's one person in this room that I have to acknowledge. I don't get a chance to do it, and I just looked at her tonight and I said I have to, and that is Mika Sofer from COL. And this is not a public service announcement, this is the truth, because she has never failed to carry Ari the way he should be carried, with the greatest respect that he deserves, and understanding that he died al Kiddush Hashem, he died for the Rebbe, he died for our community, he died as a Jew. And if anybody knows, which most of you don't, so we're going to go over a little bit of it, that when the murderer went up on the ramp and he met the boys in the van, and they asked him, did you see who was in the van? And he said, yes, Hasids, and they were on top of each other. And it was then that he began to shoot up the van, first from the passenger side, then from the driver's side, and he kept changing his guns with over 40 rounds of ammunition. And going back to Rabbi, I listened to everything that you said. I don't know where you are. But when you said that Ari was very, God also knew that Ari was very, very, very. That's why he picked him, you understand? So being very is not, he was. Ari, I know, because I'm his mother, and all his siblings that are in this room know it. In fact, his thing wasn't Stam, this boy. He was, I always say, he was the best of heaven and earth. It's everything that we were supposed to be. He is on one hand, yeah, he played ball like nobody played ball. He loved pizza like nobody loved pizza. He was a buzz of a dumb. But at the same time, there was a part to him. And tonight, it's like, I'm going to talk a little privately. We're a small group here. We could have had 1,000 people in this room. But every year, this is a very important time for me. I feel like it's friends and family who I love dearly, who carried and walked this road for years and years and years. And you're still here. We're still remembering as we should. As we should. And when it came to the Rebbe, and I was his mother. There's nobody. It's Yartzeit. You all know the story with Ari when he went up to the Rebbe, and I'm going to say it again tonight because I was his mother, and I was the one who said to him, it was when the Rebbetzin died, and it was just this past month. And I remember when he was in the house, and I was so worried, and we were also worried about how the Rebbe was doing. And I remember telling, I go, Ari, because every year the Rebbe would give only to his maskiros and whoever worked for him, the Rebbe would give whole matzahs. Everybody else passed the Rebbe, they'd get pieces, depending on who it was. The people who worked for the Rebbe, Ari's father was a Ben Bayis, and so was Ari. He'd go with his father, he'd give a whole matzah. And when he was going by the Rebbe, that Pesach, after the Rebbetzin died, before he leaves the house, I call Ari over, and I said, listen, Ari, I want you to invite the Rebbe to the house to eat with us at the Seder. And I promise you, I wouldn't lie, because right now I feel like I'm sick. I mean, this is a holy night. And Ari literally turned white. That's all I can say to you. Ma, because to him, as to all of us, the Rebbe was Kadosh and Kadosh, Kadosh. And even in my home, although Ari would go on a weekly basis and more than a weekly basis, and you did not hear this before, because it's the first time I'm saying it, that the Rebbetzin would call me and ask me to send Ari over. And that would happen frequently. She just loved Ari so much. And he knew his place, what he had to do, and he would go there. But that day when I sent him, but he also understood who the Rebbe was. And the Rebbe was, it's so interesting that he knew it, even though he was in the Rebbe's house all the time. You're talking, my kids were there, they knew the upstairs, the downstairs, the kitchen, where everything was. I mean, this was like a regular occurrence in my house. I know to all of you but to us, it was like going to visit Bubby. That's the way it was. And that's the way it was with all the kids, but especially Ari, he was the oldest. And when I said to him, go to the Rebbe and tell him that I'm inviting him to come eat, he literally turned white. But one thing he had, I promise you when I say this, he had such kibbud avei, my son. He really, really did. He wasn't fresh, he listened, and I said it, and humbly, he just did what I told him to. So we all know the story that he went up to the Rebbe, and as he was passing the Rebbe to get the matzahs, he said, my mother's inviting you to eat with us in the Seder. And the Rebbe looked up at him, gave him a big smile. He said, tell your mother I'm not going to be alone. And he said, and Ari, of course, is walking away shaking. And then the Rebbe calls him back and goes, and remember to tell your mother what I told you, that I thank her very much. And of course, he came home. He did the same thing the next night. So that's the story of Erev Pesach's story. But now I want to move on to something else, because we all talked about Achayit and Alibo, and people in this room, especially Yerachmiel Ben Yamison, who's in this room, knows this about me. I never leave anything alone, and he knows, so I can't just have this thing tonight without doing something about it. And so, of course, none of us have menucha with what's going on in Israel. I for sure don't. And I was called today, I was telling some of you to Harlem. The mayor called me to go to an event at Harlem. I was there all day long and literally walked in the last minute. There was a black and Jewish roundtable. And I got up to speak. And I spoke, of course, about the museum and what we do here and all the kids we teach. And we talked about anti-Semitism and what we have to do about it. And then I said to them, because I had to, I go, and I know the monster in the room is October 7th, I go, because nobody wants to talk about it. I go, but we have to start talking about it. So of course, you know, the many pastors are in the room and they're shaking their head, they do, they have to. So I feel like tonight is not just about Ari, and especially because Leah, who is my daughter Sarah, who lives in Australia. It is her daughter Leah is in Israel now with JLI on a solidarity mission, and she is one of the people who is in charge of running it. And she sent me today a picture. Today she went to the Nova site. All the people were murdered there. And you look at it, and I sent it to so many people, so many goyim, I sent the picture. But the picture is branches, and you see a vast like the bridges. I'm thinking, oh my God, they're probably going to cut the trees down and make it a park and call it the Nova site. How much you want to bet? I'm telling you that that's kind of a side joke, and that's sad, because we built so many monuments not up to the Jews. But what she wrote to me was this. She said, at the Nova site now, and thinking of Ari, along with all the neshamas that were lost al Kiddush Hashem, maybe be reunited with Ari, very smooth Hashem. And that's what I thought of. I was thinking of on the way here, and it was in my head all day long today, thinking that exactly that we can't stop fighting for them, we can't stop fighting for the hostages. And often in my own nights, when I can't sleep and I think about my son died, I have no menucha, but I could only imagine, oh my God, it doesn't come close to those mothers and fathers and family members who don't know where their family members are. The torture has to be beyond excruciating. And then one of my very close friends who's in the press in Israel called me this week, and she said, it's unbearable what's going on here. Where is God? And she's so hopeful. She goes, where? Where is the Eberstein? She goes, we've done so much for God. Where is he? And how come this is all happening? She goes, you know, she said to me, because she knows I work in terrorism, she said, Israel could capture the terrorists all over the world, but they can't get back their own people. And that is such a thoughtful thing to think of, because clearly God's in charge. That's the bottom line at the end of the day. And the Eibishter, for whatever reason, does not want them yet to come home. And it couldn't be soon enough or fast enough. So I am standing here tonight in the name of my child, who was a kadosh, who died, al Kiddush Hashem, Hashem slaughtered him alive. In the same way, I'm saying it, God, listen to your people, to their crying, to their suffering. Because ad masa, that's the real truth. Now I'm going to move on to something else that I felt was important. So I was telling my son before, he goes, Ma, you never told this to us. And I was reading this, I found the Shabbos, a file that nobody has ever seen or heard from me, but it was notes that were spoken to a reporter on, and in it I wanted to read it to you. If you close your eyes, you're going to say, didn't that happen yesterday? You're telling me that this happened all these years ago? And this is where I'm going to read to you. It was what took place on the bridge and the day, and how I found out. And Esty Kaplan, who's not here tonight, she doesn't feel good, and Chumi is here. But Esty was the first one who knew and who heard. I was standing right next to her, but in the office. But I think what's significant is the part where I talked about after it happened. So the first thing I want to read is about the President of the United States. And so, while we were in the hospital, and who talked about St. Vincent's? I can't remember, somebody spoke about St. Vincent's while we were there. And while we were there, we got a call from the president. And Ari was murdered because of what took place in Israel. Because Baruch Hossein went into the mosque and shot up the mosque, where he killed 29 Arabs. And so that afternoon, I'm reading you what exactly happened. We received a call at the hospital from President Clinton. My husband and I passed the phone back and forth. My husband told Clinton he hoped he would be as strong in the outrage over the shooting here as he had been in denouncing the Hebron massacre. I saw your reaction to what happened last week in Israel, my husband told the president. And I am sure that you will react to what happened to your citizens in the United States much more strongly and more forcefully. I surely will, Clinton replied. At the time, Clinton was involved in the Oslo Peace Accords, attempting to broker, please hear me, attempting to broker an agreement between the Palestinians and the Israelis. He later released a statement from the White House about Ari, in which he lamented that such a tender, intelligent boy could be the victim of such brutality and immutable violence. And he then followed up, and I actually printed it out, with sending me a note with someone, a handwritten note, where he said this. And you could say, who cares? I'm only trying to tell you that nothing's changed. Same story, different day. The same thing they're saying on the news every minute is exactly what happened all those years ago to Ari. So nothing changes. And he wrote this: Dear Mr. and Mrs. Halberstam, I want to say again how terribly sorry I am about the tragedy that took your son's life and brought so much grief to your family. My prayers are with you today, along with my deepest commitment to deal with the hatred and criminality that caused your son's death. Sincerely, Bill Clinton. The reason I read it to you is because Ein Chodesh Tachas HaShemesh. They hated us then, they hated us now. They don't want to make a peace deal. We all know that. Bring our kids home and our people home. That's what our prayers have to be, period. And then I just also want to say one other thing that I also want you to hear, and this you've also heard before. Don't think I'm just looking through papers. These are important papers that we have. When we while we had, come on. While we were right after Ari died, and we were sitting Shiva at home, we received, I'm looking for it, but it's somewhere here, we received in our mailbox swastikas, hang up phone calls, same story, different day. Don't you get it? Everything that's playing out in the streets right now is exactly what we lived through back then. The only difference is we were alone and we had to deal with it single-handedly. And that made the difference. So this road that I walked was a road I walked alone. I'm sorry to say that there are too many people that it's happening to right now, and it happened to over all these years. But nevertheless, it's really, it's again to teach us all, nothing changes. The hatred that they had then is the hatred they have now. The hatred they had with the 6 million are the same hatred. You're going to say, we know. What are you saying to Mary? But I'm telling you first person, because it happened to me. And if it happened to me, it happened to you, and it happened to all of us. So we need to remember every single minute of our lives and every single day and not forget. Even though we have to move forward, we have to know, and that is why Unity is the most important part of it, the most important. Now, the other thing I just want to also say, it's a time to give thanks. So I was telling my son today, he goes, Ma, so what's the Chayit and Aliba? So right after we got up from Shiva, which was the following week, we stood up literally a week before Pesach. And we went to Sterling, my sister in South Africa, for Pesach. And while we were on the airplane, on the way there, the stewardess, first the pilot, came and sat with us. Because, of course, unfortunately, we were front page news that whole week. But then, the stewardess came over and said, we don't have food for you. We don't have enough food. And then she came over and said, somebody send their food over. There's somebody on the plane that doesn't want to give their name, but send their food over because I had my kids with me and they had to eat. And a 16-hour flight from here to South Africa. And so, we went to South Africa. Years later, South Africa brought me out, Woman of the World, and I was a speaker all over. And one of the places that I went to was Cape Town. While I'm in Cape Town and I'm speaking, someone comes up to me, a man, and he says to me, I was on that plane with you when you flew to South Africa, and I'm the one who gave you the food, send the food over to your family. And I said I had to come all the way to South Africa to say Yashikaya. But more importantly, me, Ka'amcha Yisrael, there is nobody like us people, like who we are as Jews. And that is what I want to say to the Eibishter tonight. Look at your people. Learn from them. You just said, Rabbi, we are copies of the Eibishter. Eibishter, now you have to learn from us. Because look what we do for you, and look what we do for each other. And with that, that is my V'achayit and Alibo tonight. And with that I say, please enjoy your evening. Please remember Ari. Should be a meditation for all of you. Oh yeah, I forgot. Sorry. So, you know, we always leave, I don't want to say the best for last, but this is also Yartzeit, so it's not, we talked about happy and sad, so there's, you know, a combination of both. And you should know that for years and years, I was in the courtroom, we all were, and we had more than one trial. During the trial, we had every boy, there were 15 kids on the van, and every single kid on the van was called up and had to testify in court. Because that's the way it is. They ask questions, and there are questions, and there are questions for the defense, and people try to tear the story down. In the last 30 years, and I keep going back, I hate the number, but we have never had a boy or anybody who was on that van speak. But tonight, I don't want to say I'm proud, but a voice who I even could remember crystal clear, and I've read over the transcripts more than once. There was somebody who was the most articulate of all the 15 kids on the van, and I think he made the case in court. And he's with us tonight. He's Rabbi Yaakov Reida. He's a shliach himself in Roslyn. You should know, he doesn't know, but for years, his mother would leave a check in my box at work without ever calling me or saying anything for Ari. Very, very special people, all of them. He's extraordinary, and his wife is my daughter Sarah's very, very, very close friend. Devorah here with us tonight too. But Yaakov, you know, you always said you didn't know Ari, but you know everything that happened on that day. And so please, I'm proud to present you here while she is leaving with us. But you should know you're my main speaker. So don't do that. Don't do that. You are the main speaker tonight. And I just want you to know, it could have been everybody. Everybody's great. But your message tonight is a message that people have to hear. And you have to bring us back to that day in a way. I don't have to tell you what you have to do because you know already what you have to do.
Thank you, Dvori, and the entire family, extended family, for the honor and inviting me to come and share a few words with you tonight. I'm going to speak a little bit, not so much as an official speech, but kind of to look at the events of what took place on that day, March 1st, Chai Adar, 30 years ago, kind of through the prism and the perspective as the way I lived through it as someone who was on the van together with Ari, and how it impacted and affected my life and my perspective on life, my family's life, and the way I look at the world and look at things around. And hopefully that can be somewhat of an inspiration and somewhat of a perspective that we can all appreciate. So just to take us back a little bit to that day, that morning, but actually to be more precise, the night before. Because how did this all come about? So the night before, many of us, Bachrim, were in 770 awaiting. It was rumored that the Rebbe would be going at some point during the night to Manhattan Eye and Ear for an eye cataract surgery. And we didn't know exactly what time, when the Rebbe would go. So a lot of us just stayed throughout the night in 770, saying Tehillim, sleeping a little bit on our heads on the table. And somewhere about 5, 6 in the morning, we heard that the Rebbe would be making his way to the hospital. And many of us Bachrim went outside, we tried to catch rides, and I went along with, there was a van that was driven by Shalom Wilhelm, who had this van rented for release time that he had. And we packed in a bunch of guys and we went to the hospital, together with many other cars and vans. We got to the hospital, we had our Tefillin with us. The Rebbe went up for the surgery. He kind of took over the whole lobby. Imagine a whole group of Bachrim and Himbalite and Anash that were packed into the lobby of the hospital. Must have been quite a scene, davening there. And somewhere around 9 o'clock-ish or so, the Rebbe was going back to 770, and we all packed back into the van and headed making our way back. And I remember clearly, this image of, it was a 15-passenger van, and there were 15 of us already packed into the van, and we're pulling away from the hospital, and all of a sudden we see this guy, you see this kid, this bacher who's running after the van. He needed a ride. It was Ari, and he was like banging on the van, and we opened the door for him, and he came inside, and there was no seat for him, so he actually sat on the wheel well, the right side wheel well. I could envision that very clearly, and we started going, made our way, and as we're going, and you know the story. We're on the FDR Drive, heading towards the Brooklyn Bridge, and all of a sudden we start hearing these popping sounds, these noises, these bangs, and we really didn't know what it was. We seriously thought maybe it was blew out a tire or something, and then all of a sudden someone started screaming, "The Arabs are shooting! Arabs are shooting!" So we ducked down to the floor. I ducked down on the floor and pulled some other guys with me onto the floor who was sitting next to me, behind me. I was on the left side. I was in the second seat, left side window. I remember exactly where I was sitting. And that's when we realized what was happening. And Shalom was sitting there trying to drive across the bridge, putting his head down, literally like below the dashboard, so he wouldn't be hit by bullets. And somehow miraculously made it across the bridge. And as Rory said, he was switching from the gunman, Rashid Bazi Machshumar, was going from the right side to the left side, trying to shoot as much as possible. And finally, when we got to the other end of the bridge and stopped by the courthouse there, that's when we first kind of looked around and saw the carnage and saw what was going on, so what happened. It was a very intense time for all of us, and although, as you mentioned, I wasn't zoicha to know Ari that well on a personal level before that. I was a year or two older than him in yeshiva. But what we all went through, all of us that were in the van, and most of us were a little bit older. Most of them were my age, a couple of younger guys. It put us into a situation where immediately we felt like one family, and immediately we felt like it was all of us, and whatever happened, whether it was with Ari or Nachum or the ones that were more lightly injured, it was just something that took over our whole lives. Running to the hospital, running to St. Vincent's Hospital, where Ari and Nachum were, and the other hospitals. And I recall, so this was Tuesday morning. So the first somewhat profound impression that happened, that the perspective that we got from that. So I used to go every Friday. I would go Miftzayim to Roslyn, Long Island, as a bacher, as a boy. And I went that Friday, as I usually did. And as you mentioned, this was already, it was front page news and the newspapers, on the television, day in and day out, while all this was going on. And I walked into some of the places that we visited to go and put on tefillin with people, and there was one particular place that I walked into where, when you go and visit other Jews, there are those that are more cordial and friendly to you, and those are the ones that kick you out and not interested in seeing you. So there's one particular fellow, John, who was always rude and not interested in us coming, never put on tefillin or something. I walk into his place, and everyone's there, and they're looking at the TV, and they're looking at the television, and it's all front page news. And they're looking at me, and they say, you know what happened? I said, John, you see what you're looking at? I was there. I was on that van. And I could have very easily not been here today. And if I'm here now, coming into your store, there must be a purpose. There must be some reason why God put me here. And like a tatala, he rolls up his sleeve, and he's ready to put on tefillin. And he's put on ever since then. And he wasn't the only one. There was 1, 2, 3 of those people who, when they felt the impact of what happened, and they realized the magnitude of what was going on, and kind of sensed that idea that, yes, life is purposeful, life there's a mission, and there's a meaning to life, and God puts you wherever you're meant to be at a certain time. And it was just a profound kind of, it may sound simple, but it was a certain realization that I can say hit me, and as well impacted those around us. I remember then Motzei Shabbos, Saturday night, so I remember that I stayed in Roslyn that Shabbos together with a good friend, Melly Light. You know Melly Light? We stayed to help make the minyan in the Chabad house for Shabbos. And after Shabbos, we drove straight to Manhattan, straight back to the hospital. And I'll never forget, as we're walking towards the hospital, and Levi Cohen was walking towards us, and we saw in his face that it wasn't the news that we were hoping for. We made our way that night back to through Crown Heights, Eastern Parkway, NCFJE, and I believe Mayor Giuliani came and spoke to all of us that night, spoke to everyone, all of us that were in the van at NCFJE. Pretty much spent the whole night there. Very, very intense time. Everyone wanted to make sure that Ari would have the best spot next to the Rebbe in the Beis HaChaim. I remember that very, very clearly. fighting for that, and they had all of us, all the Bachrim. We were gonna make sure that no matter what, that was gonna happen. And it was like they said, okay, we have to lie down on the floor there. We're gonna do it. Remember that? And I'll never forget the impassioned speech by Rabbi Hecht in front of 770. Shia was? Who was it? Shalom.
He was
Ber.
supposed to be here tonight.
Yeah, impassioned speech when he spoke about the letter in the Sefer Torah that was damaged that Shabbos and Shul, and you vividly remember. I literally remember like it was yesterday. Then, the subsequent days living through this terrible tragedy with Ari and feeling like this was literally our family. There was, they became our family, and we lived through it that way. And I remember thinking to myself, it's somewhat of a inexplicable phenomenon, inexplicable oxymoron, where on the one hand, we're taught, we learn Chassidus, and we learn about bitachon and having faith in Hashem and trust that everything is going to turn out good and everything's going to turn out positive. And you're going through a few days and you're really thinking that way, that everything is going to be good and everything's going to turn out positive. And then it doesn't seem to happen that way. And where does that put your bitachon? Where does that put your trust? And I remember learning some of the letters and the teachings of the Rebbe, where he says that, yes, it's true that before something happens and you look towards it with a perspective of bitachon and trust that everything is going to be good the way you envision that it's going to be good. And then, if unfortunately it doesn't work out that way, then all of a sudden your perspective changes to emunah. To emunah that, as Devori mentioned and said so many times, that although we don't understand the ways of Hashem, we know that God is in charge, and we know that ultimately God has a reason. There's some reason why this happened. Of course, although it's the mysteries of this world that we don't understand until Mashiach comes. And I remember thinking to myself, this is such a life-altering perspective. How, on the one hand, you can go into something with a feeling of bitachon and trust that everything is going to work out the way you wanted it to work out, and then just in an instant, your whole perspective sometimes has to then shift from looking forward with bitachon to looking backwards with emunah. And the Rebbe addresses it and says, how is it possible for a Jew to see life that way? Because that's the impossibility of the uniqueness of the infinite nature of the soul of a Jew. That you can just change like that and switch perspectives from looking forward with bitachon to looking back with emunah. And it's something which affected me very strongly, very deeply. I remember thinking to myself, it shouldn't be for these type of events to have to kind of make you face reality and make you look at life in the real way. But if it's not for events like this, what else is Chassidus for? Like if Chassidus is not there to help you get through such a crazy thing of life by giving you a certain perspective, by giving you a certain outlook, by giving you a certain way to see the world, to see your connection to Hashem, then what else is Chassidus for? And every year since then, my family knows, and the community knows, Chai Adar, Chav Gimel is always a time that we always I always share these memories and share these stories as if they happened today and happened yesterday. My kids all grew up on it, and every year they say, oh, you know, tell us the story. Even though they heard the story again, they always want to hear the story. They always want to hear the story again and want to hear all the details. And I feel that my family, my community, people that I've come in contact with, I feel that they at this point, they all know Ari. They all heard of him, of course. They all see, you know, the impacts of what this had on everybody's life, on the entire Klal Yisrael, and perhaps the entire world. And also that the perspective on life, that when we think about what Chassidus gives to us, and the perspective of emunah and betachon, and what it means to think about Hashem, even though when we don't understand Him, we're maybe upset about what He did, is something which definitely became so real to me, to my family, and to those around me. And there's no question that this is all in the schus of HaKadosh, Aaron Yosef, who merited to have such a powerful impression and impact on all of us who were in the van, on all of us who knew him. And just to conclude with one last little anecdote that happened at that time. So I remember my class then in Al-Torah, so we were a very close class, and we kind of lived through this whole event together, Shir Beis Al-Torah. We were with Kiva Wagner, Shalom was our mashpia that year. We fabring a lot to try to, to help give us chizuk and help us get through this whole parsha. And I do recall, so in the very beginning, when our good friend, when Nachum Sasankin, when he was still fighting for his life, and we had a fabrengen, we had a get together at one of our friends' home, and one of the boys took a bottle of mashka, took a bottle of vodka, and said, we're going to put this aside for when Nachum comes back, for Nachum's Sudas Hadah, for the celebratory celebration, when we celebrate when Nachum comes back. And we all know the story, and defied the odds of the doctors, and Baruch Hashem, he made it back. And we actually did have a subsequent fabrengen where we used that bottle of mashka with Nachum. And then Nachum ended up marrying my wife's cousin. We became mishpacha. But our bracha for everyone and for Dvori and the entire family is, of course, that we should all take to heart all the beautiful things that everyone spoke about. Ari or his friends, and the family friends and the relatives who spoke such wonderful, powerful insights and lessons, and in this way, which is Devori's whole attitude of turning a tragedy into growth, and looking at the positive growth of what comes out from these events, and that very soon, take it from Yad Mamish, we should be able to take that same bottle of mashke that was perhaps put away maybe 30 years ago, and use it for the fabrengen together with Ari, for Kitzur Radanu, Sheikh Neafar, with the Rebbe leading us out of Galus. Take it from Yad Mamish. Amen. Thank you very much.
Rabbi Ryder, I just want to thank you on a personal level. I've never heard a recollection and a story from a first-person account, someone who was on the band, who had experienced it firsthand. So it was quite meaningful for me, difficult to hear, however meaningful, quite literally gave me chills to hear that. So I appreciate you sharing that. I appreciate you sharing that to everyone here and to everyone listening in virtually. As you mentioned, we're just coming from Purim, where Purim is all about the ability to transform, that transformational energy, where we transform sadness to gladness. And my sincerest blessing to you and your family, Rabbi Ryder, and to everyone here, is that may we transform any difficulty into blessing, and may you and your family have much continued health, happiness, success, mazel, bracha, refuah, and everything that you need in a revealed and open way. We're going to break now for dinner, so please do enjoy. Thank you so much.
Just like she has said, the Napa is
everyone can please find their seats. I'd like to carry on the program, commemorating the 30th Yartzeit anniversary of Kodesh Aaron Yosef and Tanan David. Next up, we'd like to call on a dear childhood friend of my brother Ari, who was not only a friend, but somebody who we all know, as we all know Ari, he had one of his keen interests and something that he had great zrizus in, alacrity in, was going on Mivtzayim on every Friday. Shmuley Metzger alluded to it earlier when he spoke, but I think it would be apropos to have Zalmi Heber come up, Rabbi Zalmi Heber, who is a childhood friend of Ari's and somebody who went on a weekly basis with Ari, to Wall Street, Lower Manhattan, to bring Yiddishkeit, to bring Judaism to those Jews who may be a bit distant from it. So I'd like to ask Zalmi to please come up, share some of his recollections about Ari, some of his interactions, and some personal memories. Thank you.
Good evening, I'll make this very short. With the L'chaim, Ari's at Shama Shem Aliyah. Just Aliyah is coming back down, Shama B'gof L'makim Asar I've asked to share some memories of my childhood friend Ari. It was 30 years ago, a couple of days ago, on Chai Adar, I was celebrating my brother's wedding in Eretz Yisrael. And after the chuppah, there was a commotion downstairs, and someone called me out, and then it was all over the news in Eretz Yisrael that there was a shooting. And I was told on the sidelines that my very close friend, Ari, got shot. And we didn't know what to expect. We were, there wasn't exactly WhatsApps where you can get instant updates. So the news was coming very scarce. We weren't sure exactly what the news was, what was the situation. But I remember I was glued to the phone with my friends, our classmates, to hear update in real time what was going on. And you can imagine, I wanted to be there together with our class. And we were all saying Tehillim, hoping for the best outcome. A couple of days later, it was Motzei Shabbos. I remember I was in my grandfather's house in Chabad, and I fell asleep. In the middle of the night, or I should say early morning, I had a dream. And I shared this story at the Shloshim 30 years ago, so bear with me if you heard it. I had a dream, and Ari, my close friend, appeared. And he was walking up the staircase, the yeshiva staircase of Mesivta Militera, and I was walking down, and he was walking up. And we met in the landing in the middle between the two floors in the dream. And I look at him, and I said, Ari, what's going on? And he looks at me and he says, I'll be okay. Everything's okay. And I woke up in a cold sweat, and I woke up, my brother was sleeping next to me. And then I went back to sleep. An hour later, one of our classmates, Zalman Rosa, called me up. And he was crying on the phone. He said an hour ago, Ari passed away. And I remember vividly, we were torn. We couldn't be by the Malaya, and far away. And it was hard for me personally because that year, as Shia mentioned, every Friday after yeshiva, after 12 o'clock, everyone's dismissed. Like Rabbi Metzger said, our friend, someone would go to the park. So most of us chose to go on Mivtzayim. Ari was my Mivtzayim partner. And every single week we would go to Manhattan, downtown Manhattan, the Wall Street area, and we'd put on film with fellow Yidden. And I remember before I went to Israel, I told Ari to make sure that they keep them going on the route, and he should bring along someone else with him because we were young. We were only 16 years old, so we always go with a partner. And I wasn't going to go that year because I was there to school. I made sure to tell him that he should have somebody to take my place, and he didn't go that way. So it was very hard for me to hear that news that he wasn't with us. Just to share a couple of memories, that past summer, I was zeichet to be Ari's roommate in Yeshiva's Kayetz, in the summer program. It was two bachim per room. And because I was going with time with him, so I guess naturally we were close enough to want to roommate together. And just to share a couple of memories, like very said Bachayit in the Liba, it's more about celebrating, I can't imagine it's 30 years ago, of his passion and his love for Yiddishkeit. When he would go with Tzayim, the way he spoke to people, the way he interacted with people to try to get people to put on film. But how did he do it? He did it cleverly. We didn't start with film. I wasn't a big sports fan, but Ari was. So when he would meet somebody, first thing they talk about is the games of that week and the different players and the different touchdowns or home runs that they made. And once he got them excited about the conversation of sports, then he would say, and now you have to put on film. And that's the way he would lure people, so to say, to put on film. And he really connected with them. And afterwards, as a result, we always went out for pizza. There was a pizza shop on the end of the block every single week. He loved pizza. Downed a couple of slices when I was only on my first slice. A lot of ketchup, that's what I remember. And he had this passion. I remember when he passed away, so one of the people who we visited, Howard Feinstein, who knows him very well. He also passed away recently. He was very moved by Ari, and he wanted to do something. And I promised, I remember then, that we're going to, later on when we get married, we'll have a chance, we'll build a shul, and we'll name it after Ari. And Baruch Hashem, there's a shul today in Washington with Ari's name. He was very instrumental, the Halberstam family was very instrumental building that shul and putting Ari's name in it. It's called the Ari Shul. I believe that's the only shul that's carrying Ari's name, aside from this beautiful museum. But, as our class, right away we wanted to do something in his memory. And we were thinking, we were teenagers, the Rebbe was not well, and it was before Gimel Tammuz, and it was right after Ari passed away. We didn't know what to do and how to respond. So the first thing we did was we collected money and we made a tape lighter, if you remember. This was before CDs was common. So we collected enough money and we sat there in nights and basements and took all the Rebbe's sikhs, all the Rebbe's talks, which were hundreds and hundreds of hours of tapes, and we duplicated them several times. So there could be a lending library. If anybody wants to hear the Rebbe's talks, they'd come and they would ask us which date they want, and they would give them a tape and they would listen to it. And hundreds of people throughout Crown Heights used to come to the library in Yeshiva in all the schools of Ari. That was the first thing. That, Lag BaOmer, a couple of months after he passed away, was Ari's 70th birthday. And we wanted to do something special, so we decided we were going to do a tank parade. And it was going to end up in City Hall, and there was a big press conference there. And I remember one clear memory, we rented, it was vans, like mini Mifta tanks, and we lined them up on the Eastern Parkway, starting from 770. And we rented 17 tanks corresponding to Ari's years. And it was vans, so all 17 was able to fit from 770, and the last van was parked right in front of Ari's house, which was then at the time on the corner of 706. And as the parade was leaving, there was press and it was a big event. The last tank corresponding to Ari's last year, the 17th tank, wouldn't start. And I remember it stopped there and it stayed there the entire parade while all the other 16 tanks continued. And it wasn't a coincidence, as the Prophet said, that tank corresponding to his year. Do you remember that stood? And it just did not want to start. There's so many memories I could share, but the time is short. But I want to just end off. We say when Moshe Rabbeinu was asked to take the Yidden out of Mitzrayim, and he pleaded with Hashem, I don't want to be the right one. And then he asked Hashem, tell me who you are. Who can I tell the Yidden are? What can I tell the Yidden who you are? Mashmoy, what's your name? What should I tell them? And the Eibishter answered, say, Ehye Shlachani Aleichem. That's the way the Eibishter called himself, Ehye Shlachani Aleichem. Instead of saying the other names. And then it says, Ehye Imach. Hashem will be with you. But the name that he used, instead of Elohim or Lekah or Adonai or Tzvakos, he used Ehye. And I remember them at the time when Ari passed away, my class was cooking in the Vart, that Ehye is Russian Tavis, HaKadosh Aaron Yosef Halberstam. And we lived with that when Moshe Rabbeinu asked, what's your name? Say to the world, Ehye Shlachani Aleichem. And we really believe that the Eibishter sent HaKadosh Aaron Yosef Halberstam to represent Hashem's name into the world. Look what was accomplished after 30 years, how much was done. I was by the Brooklyn Bridge ceremony a couple of months ago already. And everybody was speaking there at the time, how it very changed the landscape of how we look at terrorism and courses. Remember, we flew down to Washington at the time to give a course on terrorism. It was all over. Everybody was affected by Ari in somewhat way or the other. And for us, Chayim and Levi, I personally, and our classmates, I talk on behalf of everybody. I remember him every day. I'll say something that I never said before, but since he passed away, every single day. The Rebbe Sheish Schirs. He always added a seventh schira, seventh remnant. I always say Zachar, Asher Asa, Ari, Hargetim with the bridge. I should always remember it. He's good.
Wow, Zalmi, there's not much more to say after that. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Beautiful, really beautiful words. Spoken from the heart. Words spoken from the heart, enter the heart, so thank you so much. To wrap things up this evening, I'd like to call up a dear family friend, Achron Chaviv. Last but certainly not least, Rabbi Michael Miller, someone who has been with our family through thick and thin, who has known our family and has been the close confidant. I know he's been there. I'd like to call you up to share a few remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Shia. Shia leaned over to me and said, Michael, would you say a few words? And I said, did your mother ask that you asked me? He said, yes.
We made it up earlier.
I didn't know. So I'm the last of the presenters. And Shia mentioned to me that this is obviously we all know that it's the 30th year. I'll speak about something regarding 30, Shloshim. I started to think, we know that in Avelis there's a Shiva, there's a Shloshim, there's the Yud Aleph Chodesh, and there's the Yud Beis Chodesh. I didn't want to speak about that. Despite the fact that in Bamidbar, Dalit, I think it is, and it speaks of, in regard to the Meradlim, Yom Lashona, that every day is like a year. I'm sure it's that every day for you, with the loss of Semin Komdomo of Aaron Yosef of Ari, is like a year. But I want to think about Shloshim from a different perspective, the perspective of Leviim. I know that the Mishpacha is not the B'nai Levi, but nonetheless, when did the Leviim conduct their business. They were ben shloshim shana v'mala. Actually, there's a machlokes. There's a machlokes as to whether it was ben 25 or ben shloshim. And one shita is the shita of found in Midrash and found in the Gemara. One shita is that at shloshim they did the avoda, but at 25, at 25, they learned the avoda. So they learned it for 5 years, and after 5 years they did the avoda. But let's look at the second shita. B'nai Kahas had a very responsible job. They carried the Aron. How did they carry the Aron? Ba'kosei so. They carried it, again in Bamidbar, Parak Zayin, Pasuk Tes. That's what these phones are good for. That speaks about Kahas, Ba'kosei so. They carried the Aron on their shoulders. The machlokes regarding 25 and 30 is that the work that needed to be done, the heavy-duty work of carrying the Aron, was only at age 30. But other work that was done by the Levim, like singing, that was okay for age 25. So at age 25, you could do some work. But the important work that was done, of carrying the Aron, was not done until you're age 30. It's now 30 years. 30 years since that day that Ari was gunned down in this terror attack that his mother worked so hard to be labeled as a terror attack. 30 years. So just to wrap up, the message is very clear. It's very, very clear, to me at least. Hopefully I'll convey it to you. That at this juncture, with Ari being in Gan Eden for 30 years, he is now a Ben Kahas. He is now strong enough to carry the Aron on his shoulders and to carry the burden that we, or the Jewish people here, down here, Ba'aretz, here on the ground, are now suffering from. We really need to turn to our tefillos. When we say our Bima Makim, when we say Esor Einai El Harim, when we say Mizmar Mem Zayin, as we did before when young Ari said it before, is we're also talking to Aaron Yosef. We're also talking to Ari. We're also saying to him, Dvari. We're also saying to him, you're now strong enough. You've been there for so long. You're now carrying the Aron on your shoulders. And with that Aron on your shoulders, daven for us down here. Be'ezer Hashem, to bring about Bias Mashiach Tzidkenu B'meir Yomeinu Amen L'chaim L'vrachim.
Michael, thank you. Thank you so much. On behalf of the entire Halberstam family, I'd just like to say thank you everyone here, family, friends, those who are listening in and attending virtually, couldn't be here physically. We appreciate your presence. We certainly hope that you were able to take something away meaningful tonight from Ari's life, from what he represented, what he presently still represents. As we just celebrated the Yom Tov of Purim, we carry on to the Yom Tov of Pesach, where we finally went through Yetzias Mitzrayim. We had the Exodus. And may this year be the final Seder that we need to sit together as a family. And may we all be reunited with Ari here physically in this world with the coming of Mashiach. And may we only know of good things and reveal good to us all. Thank you so much. Thank you. We're going to ask everyone to stay here. We'll have benching and then thank you.